Hello, everybody. I'm Laura Rogers, and this is Customized SharePoint List Forms in Power Apps 10 Pro Tips. And I have actually already pre-recorded this session, so I'm just going to be pushing play on the video that I pre-recorded. But so that means I'll be more free to be able to answer questions just as we go. Y'all can ask me questions the entire time because I'll just be sitting here typing, watching my own video. So hopefully the video that I play will go through the speakers. Let's see. It'll go, hopefully you can hear it. Let me know how that goes. So y'all can't hear that? Hey y'all, can y'all not hear the sound from the video? Galen, hello. I don't see any settings on my end for making the video play through, like the audio from the computer play through. So half of you were saying you can't hear it, and then someone said they can. System sounds, okay, let me see. Let me check that real quick. Oh yeah, there's the button. Okay, hold on. Include system sound, perfect. Okay, thank you. Now let's go. Hello and welcome to my session, 10 Pro Tips when you're dealing with customized SharePoint list forms in Power Apps. I'm Laura Rogers, the CEO and founder of IW Mentor. It is a training company, and I'm also a Microsoft MVP. I've been an MVP for the past 9 years. Let's go ahead and get started. Before we get started, I'd like you to know about the Microsoft 365 Collaboration Conference, which used to be the SharePoint Conference. They changed the name, and it will be March 23rd through 25th next year in Las Vegas. Hopefully we'll see you there. Check out our generous sponsors for this event. And we are doing a raffle. Would you like to win an Oculus Quest? This is awesome because I actually just ordered one of these last week and it will be in later this week. I cannot wait. We also have some charities I'd like you to check out and consider donating to these listed on the screen. All right, let's go ahead and do an overview of what the 10 tips are going to be today. First of all, we have our app's orientation. We'll talk about showing the created by person as someone's filling out a new form, conditionally showing and hiding fields. We'll talk about how to deal with required fields from SharePoint lists, the SharePoint integration properties and how those work. We'll talk about cascading dropdowns, dealing with columns and rows in your form control, and with column wrapping and column and row numbers. We'll talk about creating a way of creating separators in your forms, embedding a Power Apps form on a page in SharePoint, and then we'll talk about the concept of standalone Power Apps versus customized list forms. All right, let's get started. The SharePoint list that I'll be using today as an example is a simple travel request list. So this was created as a custom list in SharePoint, and this is the example that I'm going to use throughout all of the demonstrations as I go through the 10 tips. Our first tip is the app's orientation. So usually it's one of the very first things that I do after I've gone to the SharePoint list and clicked to customize the list with Power Apps. I immediately go to File and choose Settings and go to the orientation settings and set the app to landscape. And this will give it more real estate, and this will make it so it doesn't look like just a small box over on one side. It gives you more to work with and the ability to have a bigger form. Tip number 2 is to show the current user's name in the created by field. So one of the common things that we see in online forms and in paper forms is just the fact that it asks for your name at the top of the form. Now in SharePoint, we have the created by field. So we always know who is the person that created something or last modified something because we have those built-in fields, and we also have created, which shows when the date and time it was created and the last time it was modified with a modified field. So if you want your form to have that look of showing the currently logged in person's name in the created field, even though technically they haven't created the form yet because they haven't submitted it, so it doesn't exist yet in the list. So the trick that I use is to add the created by field to the form and then stick a little label in there that if it's a new form, it just displays the full name of the currently logged in user. That way they can see their name populated in the created by field. And then once it's not a new form, when it exists already, the created by will just show the actual created by data. It's just that fact that until the item is first submitted, until it exists, the created by is not going to actually have a value in it. The next concept to talk about is the ability to conditionally hide and show fields. In this form, I have a drop-down box called trip type. So in this example, I'm going to say I only want the estimated cost field to be displayed if it's a certain trip type. So the first step, the best way to do this is to start off by giving your drop-down box a better name instead of just the auto-generated name that it came with. So in this example, I'm renaming it CMB, like combo box, CMB pick trip type. That way when I use it in formulas, it'll have a useful name. So then I click to select the entire estimated cost card and go to the visible property. And then I just want to say it's going to be visible if the value that's selected in that pick trip type drop-down box is equal to a certain value. So I'll say combo pick trip type dot selected dot value equals, and I'll just type conference here. So I only want this to be visible if the trip type is conference. So let's test that out. So now I'll pick my trip type, I choose conference, and now I can see estimated cost, and I change it to another type, and there's no estimated cost field. Now I'll just add another, just for fun, I'll say I select my estimated cost card over on the left, even though I can't see it on the right, I can still pick it. And then go to the visible property again, and I'll just say, I want to say if it equals conference or if it equals training. So that little double pipe is an or. So the selected value is conference or the selected value is training. So now when I change it to customer visit, there's no estimated cost, but when I change it to conference or training, there is. And then just for fun, I'm going to go ahead and just unlock this just display name of this field for the estimated cost. and I'm going to make it also say the value that I picked in that other combo box. So I'll just concatenate this together. So say it already said estimated cost. So I'll say estimated cost of, and then I'll also point to that combo pick trip type dot selected dot value. And then I'll go ahead and take a look at that. And now it says, see, I have conference, it says estimated cost of conference. I pick training, it says estimated cost of training. And then of course, customer visit, estimated cost disappears. So that's a really common requirement in forms to conditionally show and hide fields. So that's a quick way to do that using the visible property on the card. Our next pro tip is how to deal with required fields in SharePoint versus required fields in your forms. So here in our SharePoint list in the list settings, my personal best practice is to not make any of the fields in the list required. Now, if you do this, keep in mind that you need to make sure that you don't have users going straight to the list and say editing it in datasheet mode or something like that, because then everything would be out the window and you wouldn't have any required fields. But what we can do with Power Apps is we can make all of them not required in the actual list settings, but then just make them required in the form. That way you don't have to worry about doing the settings in both places and make any changes. And also, even if you ever need to do any conditionally required fields, you can just do all of it in the Power App, and you don't have to worry about dealing with having the settings in both places. So go to your list settings, make all the fields not required, and then I'll show you how to deal with the required property in the form. Now, since I've made this field not required, when I'm making a change to my list settings while the Power App is open, it's a good idea to go ahead and refresh it. So I'm refreshing my list so that it will know the changes that I made. Notice that it doesn't automatically take away any required properties that were already in there. That's one of the tricky things about dealing with required properties, is that changes to the list settings don't automatically update the app. So go to each card, and each card actually has a property called required, and it is just a Boolean. So for example, I can go to my trip start here, go to required. I have to unlock the card to change this property. I'll just change it to true. It's just true or false. And then I'll go ahead and go to the trip end and unlock it, go to the required property, change it to true. So as you can see, as I'm changing each of these required properties to true, the little asterisk automatically appears next to them. So I don't recommend messing with the asterisk itself. It will just appear when required is equal to true. So notice that all of these have the asterisk, and when you submit the form, they will give an error if they don't have a value in them. So they are required now. And then the cool thing about having this required property that you can deal with is you can make it conditionally required. So for example, this estimated cost of conference, I can do something like make it required only if a certain type of trip is selected. So just like I made it estimated cost appear when a certain type of trip is selected, I can also just make it required under certain conditions as well. So instead of just saying required true or false, I'm actually going to say if the trip type is a certain trip type, then make it required. So I'm just going to use the same logic that I used in the visible property in this example. I just want, if it's showing, I want it to be required. So now I can tell when I go to customer visit, it doesn't show, it's not required. When I change it to conference or training, it is going to be a required field. Just another little fun tip is that if my required property is exactly the same thing as my visible property, I can just actually just have it reference the visible property. So I'm just going to type in the name of this exact same data card, .visible. So now the required property has the exact same Boolean condition as the visible property. So if I ever change when I want this to hide and show, it will automatically change when it's required. Now, not every single time you do this is the visible going to need to match the required, but that's just a little bonus of a really common thing that we tend to do in forms. Notice that the logic is exactly the same since required and visible are both Boolean. Tip number 5 in dealing with customized list forms is understanding the SharePoint integration property. So here's the SharePoint integration property, and you'll want to go over to the Advanced tab to see what's actually in this property. But the idea behind it is to be able to set some actions to automatically run at certain times. So you have all these sort of different triggers. Now, when you're dealing with a standalone app, or if you, a long time ago, used to do InfoPath had this concept of a form load rule. Standalone apps have a concept of an on start, and that is where you're going to put and define the actions that you want to happen automatically at that time when the app opens. Well, with the SharePoint integration properties, with a customized list form specifically, you're not going to want to do that in the on start. Go ahead and do that in these little specific sections over here in SharePoint integration. So on new is where you define what actions you want to automatically happen when someone clicks the new button in the SharePoint list. And on edit is any automatic actions you want to run when someone is editing an existing item. On view is where you define actions to run when someone clicks to view an existing item. And on save means that someone's actually clicking the built-in save button on the form in the SharePoint list. And on cancel, that's the built-in cancel button. So as you can see, you have a lot of just built-in actions that are automatically in here, but this is where you would add additional things if you wanted to add more automation, things to happen when somebody, if you want things to happen when somebody opens the app every single time, you would have to put that action in every single one of these and add it to there. If you have an app that is more complex and potentially has multiple screens in the app, and you are using a customized list form, here are some suggestions of ways that you might want to configure these properties. So new form is pretty simple. It is just sending a command to start a new blank form. But if you have multiple screens, you need to make sure that you're also going to the screen that has the form. So for example, if you have a welcome screen, that is the default form for your app, then when someone clicks new form, you probably want them to go to the actual screen that has the form on it. So you could say reset the form, send the new form command, and also navigate to the screen that has the form on it. And on edit, also you want to send an edit form command, but also go to the screen that has the form. Same thing with view form. So, and then on save and on cancel, just keep these in mind. And if you add an extra submit button to your form, you can also have it do the submit form action, but you'll still have that save button that's built into SharePoint that will also do the submit form action. And then anything that you want to happen after submit form, remember my best practice is to put that in the on success property of the form control itself and not right after the submit form action. Pro tip number 6 is cascading dropdowns. Now in this SharePoint list travel requests, I have two different lookup fields. I have division and then department, and we have multiple departments in any given division. So I have a SharePoint list called divisions, simply has the name of the divisions, and then I have a SharePoint list called departments, and each department actually has a lookup to the division that that department goes to, which is a lookup to the divisions list. So I want to achieve the cascading drop-down effect in my Power App so that when I pick a division from a drop-down, it will automatically filter the list of departments to only show the departments in that division. So here's how we go about it. Now, I'm going to go ahead and take my division and department fields and just move them up towards the top of the form first. All right, and I can see that, again, out of the box, these are just lookup fields. So they're both automatically just showing all the items in that given list. So whenever I want to do a reference to a particular field in a formula, I always like to give it a good name. So I'm calling this CMB pick division. And then I'm going to the department card, and I need to unlock it before I can use this depends on property. So I'm unlocking my department card, and then on the properties tab, I can click depends on, and this is our little setting that we use to create the cascading drop-down effect. So I'm picking depends on my combo box to pick my division, and then I actually want to create a new data connection to connect to that full list of departments so that I can have that entire list and be able to filter it like I need. So I'm creating this connection. I'm picking SharePoint. I'm picking my particular SharePoint site that I want to connect to where the list lives. It doesn't even have to be in the same site as my travel request list. These lists could be in any site. I could have one big central site that I keep my main list of departments and divisions, and I can just look up to that list from multiple Power Apps all over the place. So I'm picking my site, I'm picking my, in this case, I'm just picking my departments list. My divisions list is fine because the way it works out of the box, it's already doing a lookup to the divisions list. So I don't need to make this cascading drop-down work, I don't need to pull it in as an extra data connection, but I'm going to go ahead and pull in my list of departments as an extra data connection. So then I'll see that listed along with all the data connections in my app. And then let's go back to that depends on field, and then that's where I can pick that this field depends on division lookup. Now, so it depends on the parent control. So the parent control is the combo box where I pick the division. So I'm picking the division and I'm looking at the value of what division that I pick. And then what's the matching field? So whenever you're using this depends on functionality, it just needs to know which field in one list is going to match a field in another list. And in this case, in the departments list, the division lookup is the one that's going to match the division that I picked in the other combo box for division. So the one little thing that I need to add those, and these values need to match. So I'm going to take the division lookup value to match the combo pick divisions.selected.value. So those are both the value of that field. And then I have to do a little something extra. I'm kind of reconfiguring this combo box. So I'm going to the properties of this department combo box and clicking edit next to fields. And that's where you can define what fields in that data source, what is going to be showing in the dropdown. So there was just a system field selected by default, compliance asset ID. So I'm going there and I'm changing that to the title, which is, in this case, it's the name of the department. Now I'm going to go ahead and change it to, now you can see it says title here, and I don't have a very long list of departments. I don't need people to have to type the name of a department and search through a really long drop-down box. So I'm just going to turn is searchable to false. I'm just turning this is searchable thing off. So it's just a simple drop-down. You pick something and you don't have that sort of extra little box that expects you to type text to. To me, that's just confusing to end users sometimes. Here, when I preview the app, I'm picking human resources. And then I can see that it's only got the human resource departments. Then I'm picking information technology, and then I can see it narrows it down to the IT departments. And that is my cascading dropdown. All right, let's spruce up our app a little bit by trying a couple of different color themes. Let's see how this one looks, and maybe a darker one. Maybe let's just stick with this steel one for now. It does make the app look a little, the fonts do look a little odd with these themes. I'm not sure why, but so we already picked our fields. And now let's change it to 2 columns. So we have a couple of columns. You can add, multiple columns. You can see that the fields wrap. And now they wrap across to just 2 columns of whatever order you had already put them in. And you can take your cards and rearrange them, so you can just drag them around and they will just still wrap in that order that, that they are going down the screen. And they will stay lined up in those 2 columns as long as you have that auto snap to column turned on. I just turned snap to columns off though, and because I want to adjust and make some of these more specific widths. So I'll take my trip start and put it next to the trip end, make the destination wider, and I'll kind of, personalize this a little bit more and make it look very specific to our business process. So I'm taking my description and making it wider. I'm just putting things in the right places, getting them situated. And with snap to columns turned off, I have the ability to do that. And I can just kind of arrange things and give them different widths and just make the form look however I want. Now here's the big trick when it comes to getting these columns and rows to look the way you want and to not drive you insane. There are a couple of settings it's really important to know about. You have an X and Y axes. Now, the X and Y everywhere else in Power Apps means pixels, and that is, your X is however many pixels across the screen, and the Y is the number of pixels down. Well, when it comes to cards in a form control, the X and Y are different. The X and Y are, you're telling it which column X and which row Y. So you can completely configure the rows and columns of your cards just by using the X and Y settings on each card. So when you start getting to have these really big forms, potentially with, maybe 50 fields or something like that, which is 50 cards to arrange, it gets to be maddening trying to get the cards to kind of go where you stay where you want them to be. But if you use this trick of turning off snap to columns and specifying X and Y for every card, that is really going to help you in being able to tightly control what shows where. So for example, my very first row, my very first column, this first field is created by, I go to the Advanced tab for this card, and it says X is 0 and Y is 0. So it always starts with 0, so the very first one is going to be a 0. So 0, it's the first row, and it's the first column. All right, and then I go look at Work Phone, and it has an X of 1 and a Y of 0. Destination also has an X of 0 and a Y of 1. Because Y of 1 is the second row. Now notice when I go to trip start and trip end, they both also have a Y of 1. This means that the form thinks that that is all in the same row, and it will auto wrap and kind of stay together. So watch this. So I can take my destination, and if I take my destination and make it a little narrower, since the form thinks that the trip start and trip end are also on the same row as the destination, it will wrap, you notice it wrapped back up. But if I specify and say that I want these to be on a different row, then, which would be another Y, I'll put them on 2. So 0, 1, 2 would be the third one. And then that way they're not going to wrap and end up on another row that you don't want them on. So using this grid concept, you can really make the most of having control of where your cards show by using the X and Y. I've even gone so far sometimes as to do all just even numbers, just in case you need to shimmy another row in there somewhere later, you be able to add a row, because it is a huge pain to go down a form and have to change the rows of every single row, like all the way down the form, just to, you know, add another row somewhere towards the top. So kind of think through that, especially with your larger forms when you're doing that. But yeah, this is going to change your life once you start controlling where your cards show using the X and Y, as opposed to just dragging them around and hoping for the best. So once you have them on the right row in the column, you can still drag their widths to make them be the width that you expect, but it's the X and Y that controls that grid. To me, this is the best tip. This is the best pro tip out of all 10 of these. This is my favorite. Another fun thing to do to make your form look a little nicer, a little more professional, is to give it some sort of the appearance of sections. There isn't an actual control for sections, at least right now, but what you can do is mimic that concept by adding sort of divider lines. And the way you do that is with a rectangle shape. So for example, if I want to have a line across sort of under the created by and the phone number, I can go to this destination card and unlock it. And then I can insert a rectangle inside of the card. And make sure that you put your shape inside of the card. And what I'm going to do is I'll just give this shape a, let's see, a height of maybe 3, make it very small. And for the width, I'll give it the parent width. And the parent is the card in this case. And the X, I want it to be at the very top, so I'll make the X 0. And the Y 0. So now you can see this is just sort of a divider line between these two parts of my form. So what I can do is I can take this divider and I'll go ahead and select it, and I'll call it, just give it a better name, try to get in the habit of doing that. And then I'm just going to copy it and go down to, let's see, maybe I want to put another section kind of here. Maybe not for every single row, but maybe I have just sort of groups of controls that I want to have. So remember, you have to unlock each card when you're doing this. And just look if it has a little lock on it, unlock it, and then paste it. Now, when I paste it, it's going to give it a y-axis of 40 for some reason. But what I can do is I can make this second one, I can make it reference the first one. So I'll go to the Y and I'll say I want it to be rectdivider.y. So now it will have the same Y as the first one. So I did that for the Y, and then just to be safe, I'll go and do the same thing for the X so that it makes sure and stays the same whenever I'm copying and pasting it. So now that this one has these references in it, I can copy and paste it to this other one, and then I can maybe paste it down here above the description. So notice that now my form has some nice little sections in it, and it's just by putting rectangles in the cards. Tip number 9 is embedding on a page in SharePoint. I'll go ahead and save my app and publish it. Now, once we've published our app, publishing is the first thing we need to do, then we'll be able to embed it. So there's a Power Apps web part in SharePoint, and what you'll need to use the Power Apps web part is just the app ID of that app. Another thing to keep in mind is that there is an extra setting in your app settings, advanced settings. There's a feature called Enable App Embedding Experience, and that will change, basically it will use the background color of the page. It will change the background of the hosting canvas to white so that you don't have any kind of awkward rectangle around your app. So you might want to try this setting if you're embedding your app on a SharePoint page. It is a little tricky to embed an app that is a customized list form because it's hard to find the app ID. So I'm going to show you the trick to finding the app ID. All right, so here's the trick to getting the app ID for a customized list form. After I publish the app, click See All Versions, and from this versions page, go to Details, and this will give me the app ID. So I can take this and just copy it, and then I can go over to SharePoint, just go to any page in SharePoint. I'll just create a new page just for fun. And I will add, instead of adding text here, I will just add a Power Apps web part. And then again, I just need the app ID. And then there I have my Power App. Now, this particular app, I didn't do anything in the app, in the logic of the app, to make it automatically do a new form when someone arrives on this screen or do any kind of logic like that. So I've simply just showed you how to embed it on a page. There are additional things that you might want to do depending on what your business process is, depending on what you want that user experience to be. But that is just how you can get an app to be on a page. Pro tip number 10 is to know the difference between a standalone app and a customized SharePoint list form, and know that that is a decision that you need to try and make before you start creating the app. So everything that I've showed you in all these other tips and my examples has just been a very simple customized list form, but I don't recommend customized list forms. Everything else that I showed you about the form control and columns and logic and all that still applies. The only thing different in this presentation that only applies to customized list forms and not standalone Power Apps is the SharePoint integration settings. But I highly recommend just using standalone apps for every single app that you create. And here are a few different reasons. Customized list forms, you can't back up or export or save. You can't save it as a template. You can't save a copy of your app. You can't have any kind of dev to production concepts. The only good thing about a customized list form, in my opinion, is just the fact that it puts itself as the default form on the SharePoint list. If your users are going to that form, to that list, then they would just be using the regular buttons to create new items and edit them. So that is good, but to me it's not worth all the negatives to customizing a list form. So another thing is that the Power Apps mobile app, you can use that for standalone apps, but not customized list forms. The difference in the Power Apps permissions is really just in you're sharing it in the management interface, and with Power Apps permissions in a SharePoint list, it's just using the SharePoint list permissions. And then there's also the concept of publishing to Microsoft Teams. You can't publish a customized list form to Microsoft Teams. So I have a whole blog post I'll give you a link to, and a lot of different references, a lot sort of a rant that I go on about standalone versus customized list forms. But that is definitely the big pro tip to know, is that customized list forms aren't the only way to create a Power App. Now, I mentioned that with a customized list form, you can't open that Power App in the Power Apps mobile app, which is correct. And I mentioned that you can't publish a customized list form to Teams, which is correct. But there are a couple things that you can do to be able to use customized list form Power Apps on your mobile app. You can add a tab in a team to go directly to that list that has the customized list form, and therefore you can fill out that Power App directly in your Teams tab. You can also, when you open the Teams mobile app and you go to that tab, you can also interact with the customized list form there. And in the SharePoint app, not in the Power Apps mobile, but the SharePoint mobile app, you can go to that SharePoint list that's customized, and when you open the form, create a new item, edit, you will be using the Power App. So those are a couple of ways to kind of get around those issues that I listed in the negatives. Now I'm going to go ahead and do a demo and show you how to add this travel list to a tab in Teams. Now, the travel list doesn't even have to be in a team. It doesn't have to be in the team site where I'm adding the tab. I can add a tab to SharePoint to any list anywhere in SharePoint. So I'll go ahead and just click SharePoint, and notice that it gives me some pages and lists from this current site, but I can just click to add a page or list from any SharePoint site. And then I just need the URL. So in this case, I'm going to paste the full URL straight to that travel request list. And there we go. Now we have our travel request. That's the exact, that's the travel view that I was just showing you. And I'll go ahead and click New. And there is my Power App. Now the resolution looks a little big with my resolution on my computer, but that is how you can do it. And again, you can go to this same location in Teams, in the Teams mobile app, and you can go to that SharePoint list in the SharePoint mobile app and be able to use the Power App. Thanks everybody for attending my session. Here's some speaker feedback and event feedback, and we'd love to know what you all think. Bye. Okay. All right, can y'all hear me? Okay, let me turn my camera back on. Any last questions about that? Let me go ahead and put the links back up on the screen. Let's see, go straight to that. I'll go get that slide deck back open again. I don't see any last open questions. Let's see. Yes, there we go. Let's see, someone says, if using a standalone Canvas form and using SharePoint as the data source, is there a best practice for the type of column to use for in each field in SharePoint? Does the field type in SharePoint need to match the control type in Power Apps? Usually you create all the fields first, and then when you add the form control in the Power App, and as soon as you point it to that data source, it just kind of guesses and knows which types of controls to automatically put in the form control. So that is kind of built in. There used to be an issue with the non-delegable field types where it was actually a better practice to create things as text fields, just keep it really, really simple in the SharePoint list and not choices or lookups or people fields, but they've improved that delegation issue a lot just in the last few months, so it's not as problematic dealing with the data when it's those types of fields. So I recommend just using just whatever type of field you would normally use in your SharePoint list, and just use that when you use the form control. It just puts the controls, the associated appropriate control in there. Kevin says, for a cascading dropdown, does the user need to have permissions to the list that you reference? Yes, they do. That's a great question. Let's see. And then, are the recordings available? Yes. And a lot of what you see with Apps and Flow is it adds a new record. Is it complicated to find and update an existing record? Well, when you're dealing with a customized list form, it's basically the record that you're clicking on in the SharePoint list, whatever thing you click to view or edit, that's what it's using. So that just works. But when you're using a standalone app, you usually are going to use a gallery or table control to show the list of things, and then there are just a few pieces of some properties that you need to set up to get that all to work together. So you put the gallery in there, and then there's an item property in the form control. By default, it is just looking at whatever the currently selected item is when you have a customized list form, but you actually have to create all that from scratch when you're doing a Canvas app. So Canvas apps are a little more of a learning curve. They're standalone ones, but there are a lot of things that you just don't have to worry about or know about when you're doing a customized list form. But yeah, it's an item property for the form, and then it has to know what you clicked on in the gallery. So I teach all that in my 12-hour advanced Power Apps class, and I do have that free basics one, but the basics course is really just going to be all customized list forms too. Let's see what else. How do you find me on Twitter? WanderLaura. Yeah, someone else put that. Oh, you got it. Cool. I am WanderLaura on Twitter. Any other? I said we've got about, I don't know, 5-10 more minutes if anybody else has any more questions. Did I miss any? Let me see. The name of the YouTube channel that they are posting all these on is called the Microsoft 365 Virtual Marathon. I don't know the exact URL of it off the top of my head. Let's see. But yeah, I just searched for it in the YouTube app, Microsoft 365 Virtual Marathon, and took me straight to it. So that's where all the recordings are. And see if I missed anything else. No, I think that's about it. I think this is the last session for the day too. So, I mean, I could sit here for 10 minutes and see if anybody, I don't have any way of knowing how many people are still watching from where I sit, but so I don't know kind of whether I should just turn this off or not, or if anyone's typing. Let's see. Oh, here are a couple of questions. Cool. Permission to share an app. Do end users have to have access to the SharePoint list as well as the Power App? If you're customizing a list, customized list form, the stuff I've been showing you, it's just the SharePoint permission of people that would be going to that list, because they're going to the list, they're clicking edit form. So just whoever has the ability to edit items in the list and add items in the list, they can get to the Power App. But if you are doing a standalone app, they have to have permission to the SharePoint list, and they have to have the app shared with them. So when you share an app, a Canvas app, you're just sharing it, either making somebody an end user or a co-author. So all that, you just make them all end users, and anyone else that you're collaborating that needs to be able to design the app and make changes to the app itself, that's usually only 1 or 2 people. Those are going to be the co-authors. Let's see, has the 500 item limit been fixed? You can go into the settings, just go into app settings, and you can change it to 2000. So, I mean, the numbers in there, you can change it, 2000 is the max, but you're not gonna, it's not a best practice to try and display just one big giant long list of thousands of items in a Power App. Just like with a SharePoint list or library, you're gonna wanna try and have some kind of filters in place, some kind of categories you want people to drill down into. And just as a best practice, don't try and build apps that have big long lists of thousands and thousands of things. It's just not gonna work. Let's see. Galen said the next session there, that this is the last session, I think. So I was answering somebody's question about that. Awesome. Oh, there is another. Okay. There's another session after me. Y'all have told me that. Okay. Let me see. Galen just told me this is the last session. He's the one, he's the moderator. So no one will be jumping in once I'm done. Oh, another question. Can you set a people picker to the current user and record that in the SharePoint list? Yes, you can, but that is not just a quick, here's the button that you click to do it. It's a whole bunch of typing, like really long sort of code and functions in that card. And I do teach all that in my Power Apps class, but it's not something that I can just quickly show you. Oh, it's just a setting or something like that. It's just it's a function, and it's a good bit of logic to do that. And for advanced types of apps, is there any chance Power Apps can invoke SharePoint REST API? No, it can't. Well, why would you want to do that, though? I'm not a dev. I don't know anything about REST API. I would think that everything you would need to do with REST API, you could just do in here, because like if you wanted to write to a SharePoint list item, you could use the function called patch, or you know, just depending on what you want to do, you might already be able to do it. So I guess it depends on what your specific goal is. Okay, yes, you're right. There are no other sessions in this room. There are sessions in other rooms. That's why he told me on the last session. Yeah, cool. Thanks, everybody. All right. I can't tell if anybody else is typing questions, but you all go check out my free Power Apps course. Oh, can you incorporate a barcode reader into the Power App and send the information to a list? I think so. There is a barcode reader control, but I have literally never even touched it. I've never tried it. So I'm not sure what you could do with the barcode reader. I was thinking about trying it out, having my teenage daughter like catalog all her record albums or something like that with it. My children create Power Apps. Hopefully y'all understand the difference between the standalone and customized list forms. And when you go to, I think both of these blog posts have a link to it. April Dunham she was an MVP and now she works at Microsoft, but I've got a link to her blog post. It's a great, she's got a really great post that's really relevant to this, because she shows you how you can create in the SharePoint list, create a hyperlink that's on each item in the list that just opens up the standalone Canvas app. So it kind of gets around that issue of people going to the SharePoint list and clicking to open the app. And that's really the only reason you'd ever want to do a customized list form. Girl Scout cookies, that's funny. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for the compliments. I'm glad you liked it. I could ramble all day about Power Apps. I do SharePoint Power Hour on Wednesdays at 11 Central. On YouTube, I'm Wonder Laura. That's the name of my channel. And I do topics on all just kind of out of the box stuff since I'm not a dev. Oh, well, you asked if you could ask licensing questions. I don't know that much. I'm not a licensing expert, but no one has to have a Power Apps license or any kind of extra license to do customized list forms or even standalone Canvas apps with SharePoint as the backend. When you start dealing with SQL, Azure, maybe other premium data sources, that's when you start getting into the licensing. But if SharePoint lists are just your backend, you're not gonna, that's just built in. You're not gonna have any licensing problems. That's a big misconception. All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and skedaddle, and hopefully my teenage daughter cooked us all some dinner while I was doing this. So you all have a good evening and enjoy the rest of the conference. Bye.